You are listening to I Survived the Wild Outdoors podcast, where real outdoors men and women share their heroic tales of survival. I'm your host, Brad Mathewson, and this is their story. Today's guest is Lon Reidburn, a former contractor and now owner of Farmers Union Insurance. Lon has spent his entire 69 years hunting and fishing in Clark, South Dakota. A case of buck fever and not handling a loaded gun in a safe manner nearly cost Lon both his legs and life while road hunting with his buddy Dave on November 22nd, 1982. Can you share with us what transpired that day?
Well, I got up that morning and it first day of deer season. It's every kid's dream. You're going to get up and you're going to find that big buck, and you're just and living in the community here and that. You know, we knew we were scouted out and we seen some nice deer. So I got up that morning and I walked out of my house, and right next door to me is my neighbor, and he was carrying his gun. He was just getting ready to go, and I says, "Well, are you going out deer hunting?" And he says, "Yep." He says, "I am, buddy." He says, "I can't find anybody to go with." Well, I said, "By golly, jump in." I says, we'll go together." I said, "Either we'll get some or we won't."
Yep.
So he jumped in the pickup, and I drove, and away we went. We went out of town ways, and I knew a couple of places that I thought we could do pretty good in that. So we pulled up there and walked out, and wouldn't you know it, just like that, here come this herd. It was a herd of deer. I mean, it was a lot of deer, and right in the middle of it was a nice big buck. And I says, my partner, I said, "There's a nice one in the middle." He says, "I see it." And I pulled up and one shot, and I dropped it.
Wow.
And so, yeah, and walked out there, and just like that, I said, "Dave," I says, "this is a little better than I thought we was gonna." It was a 6x7, which
cool. That's a nice deer.
Yeah, and it curved in, and it was perfect tines across the front. So we drug it over and threw it in the pickup and went to town and hung it up. And now I put my tag on it. I said, "Well, I got my deer." And I said, "We better run out in the country." And I said, "We'll have to take a look, see if we can find you one." And he was pretty excited because the bag, that kind of a deer, and his first year of deer hunting, he was looking for, wow, this is going to be really good.
Yep.
So we went a little different direction out of town, and we drove down a grass road that was still an established road where I had seen some deer in that. And wouldn't you know it, right off the side on the passenger side, here was 3-4 deer, and they were just like they were running right at us. And I stopped the pickup, and I said, "Dave," I said, "the one in the back," I said, "that's a big buck." And he rolled his window down, and I stopped the pickup, and he stuck the gun out of the pickup, and they got in front of the pickup too fast. Yep. And we couldn't get a shot at him. I opened my door up, and I got out of the driver's side, and I grabbed the binoculars, and I said, "I'll put the binoculars on him and keep an eye on him." But I said, that front one is a nice, and that's the last thing I remember. The next thing I know, I heard a gun go off. And the next thing I know, I was laying on the ground, and I was burning. I was burning up. My face, everything was burning, and the concussion. I couldn't hear, and it was just like, it took a long time, but what happened? But pretty much in a few minutes, my friend, he come out, and he says, "My gun went off. I just shot you."
Oh, my Lord.
And I just laid there, and I just said, "Oh, my goodness." I said, "I don't know." I said, I can't move. And he says, I shot you. He says, I shot you. And I just, well, what? I says, I don't know. I said, we better get in the pickup. And for a little while, we couldn't get the pickup because he got pretty sick. I think it was pretty hard on him for the next few minutes and that. And I don't know why. I said, you gotta get your head clear. You gotta help me in the pickup. And I says, we gotta get to town. He says, and finally he just, okay, all right. He says, we'll do what we can. But at that time it was getting to be where I kind of figured something that hit me pretty hard.
Okay.
And I didn't get up. He helped me up. And I said, I can't get in the front seat. I says, my legs hurt so bad. So he put the tailgate down and he put me in the back end. And when he put me in the back end, he just kind of laid me down, and he was getting a little bit excited then. And he jumped in the pickup and he turned the pickup around, and away we went across the field going about 50.
It's going to bounce right out.
Kind of, yeah. And I pounded on the back window. This sounds to me like a hard story to believe, but what I pounded on the back window. And I said, you got to stop the pickup. I says, it hurts so bad. I can't take it. And he just stopped the pickup. And he opened the door, and then we put the tailgate down, and he grabbed me and lifted me and opened the passenger door and kept, he put me in it. And I says, Dave, I says, I don't know. I think I'm going to pass out. I says, I'm just getting really weak and really tired. No, he says, no. And, he just kept, you don't. And he just, when I was in the passenger side, he kept taking the door and trying to shut the door. And he says, the door won't go shut. I says, my leg is still in it.
Oh.
And part of the leg that was the worst one that was shot off was part of it was hanging down and couldn't get the door shut. And he lifted it in there. That's when I knew that, this is going to be, we're going to have to get to town fast. And he got me in there, and we went to town, and we got into town. We just have a little clinic in town, and he pulled right up on the grass, and he ran in. And next thing I know, there was a couple nurses. They come running out, and they helped me inside. And she looked at me, and she says, Lon, she says, I'm not going to touch you. She says, I'm just not gonna. And I says, what are we going to do? She says, I'll get the ambulance. And she says, we'll send you on to Watertown, which is 30 miles away in that little bigger place. And, then they commenced. Then my partner did call my wife and a few of my kids and that I'd been shot. And when I got to Watertown by ambulance, they pulled me in there, and the guy that was at that time the old boy that was a doctor in there, he come walking in. He was holding his X-rays, and he was looking at it. And my wife came in then, and of course she was getting, like I said, she was in a bathrobe. She was getting ready for a wedding, and she was, how bad is this, doc? How bad is it? How bad is he? And the doctor looked at him and looked at her and said, we're going to take the one leg off, and hopefully we can save the other leg.
Wow.
And she says, what do you mean? He says, the big bone, he had a name for it above my knee.
Your femur, was it?
Yep.
Femur.
The bullet went through the femur, come out on the inside of my leg, and went into the other leg and was lodged into my kneecap.
Oh, wow.
So he said, there's nothing we can do with the one leg. He said, it's busted up so bad. And he says, fortunately, he says that I can tell you there was no main artery hit there, or he wouldn't even have made it into town. And she looked, and she was, what am I going? And she says, no, no. And my father-in-law came in, and my dad, and they found out what was going on, and they says, we're going to take him on to Sioux Falls. We want to take him there to a professional place, they said. So they took me to an airport in Watertown and then flew me by plane to Sioux Falls, where they met me with an ambulance. And the ambulance took me in to the Watertown or Sioux Falls Hospital. How ironic. The guy that was on call, the doctor that night, was a local doctor from Clark, South Dakota.
Oh, really?
He was, yeah. And he looked at me and he says, I know you. He says, this is my name. And he says, you probably don't know me. And he says, you probably don't care at this point. But he says, I'm going to tell you, he says, you've got a very severe and your big bone is shattered. And he says, part of it's laying in the inside of your leg. And he said, the other one is broke, but he said, it's kind of tipped. He said, and the bullet, he said, is under your kneecap. So he says, this is going to be a long and serious surgery tonight. And he says, I'm going to tell you right up. He says, and he told my wife and dad and father-in-law, he says, I don't know if we can come out of it and save his leg. So that night they had surgery, and I was told the surgery went for 7.5 hours. And I have no idea.
That's a long time.
Yeah, I had no idea what's going to happen. The only thing what my wife said was, she says, Lon, she said, there's a good chance you're going to lose your leg. Yeah. Okay, last thing I want to hear.
Yep.
But anyway, when I did come out of surgery, I guess I kind of wondered, did I have my leg or not? And, you looked, and yeah, it's still there. I still got my leg, and that was a bright spot. And my wife came in, and then my dad and father-in-law, and he says, Lon, he says, I'm going to tell you, he says, the way it is. He said, the bullet went through the middle of your leg, he said, and he showed it. And on the inside, he says, there was a hole that came out of the first leg big enough, he says, you could put a saucer in your side of your leg. That's how much of the inside of your leg is missing. And on the other one, when it went in, he says that there was bones and flesh, and then the bullet mushroom because it was a soft nose bullet.
Yep.
And he says it cut the other one, but he said it was underneath the kneecap. He says, I got the bullet out. And he says, what we would like to do, he says, we'd like to put pins, drill through your leg, drill in different spots, drill, and put weights on there and see if we can pull what's left of the bones back together and let them grow together.
Okay.
He said, I'll tell you, he says, we could plate it, pin it, and everything, but he said, it'd be a tough on you later on. He said, if I can just do it that way, have them grow back together, he said, it'd be stronger and better for you. The downsides, he says, you can figure on you're going to be in the hospital for 6 months. And, then I just timed and well, okay, yeah, about 6 months.
Yeah.
Well, you got a wife and family and that, 6 months is a long time.
It is.
But I laid on my back for 6 months, every day remembering what happened, how it happened, and I remember to this day. I remember what it was. Just I didn't know at the time. The neighbor that went out And when hunting with me, he had just bought this 243, and he'd never shot it.
Oh, wow.
It was brand new to him.
So he wasn't familiar with his rifle at all.
Right. And the safety, it was a bolt action, and the safety was on the bolt.
Okay.
On the back side.
Yep.
After, I don't know how long it was, and I wouldn't have the right name for the people that they came in and they said, we want to reenact what happened so that you're clear on what happened. They said they talked to the hunting partner, and what had happened was the deer, when they were running on the passenger side, he put the window down, stuck the gun out, took the gun off safety, and when they went in front of the pickup, he didn't put the safety back. And in the excitement, I guess you could say, when he leaned in the door, he locked the door, and he was trying to get out.
Yep.
I've done it, buck fever and that, and he couldn't get out. So what he did, my door was open and I was standing right outside, so he scooted across and stuck the gun out to get out, and he pulled the trigger. They figured it was about 2.5, 3 foot away from me when it went off.
Oh, wow.
And and so they said that's where the burning and the concussion of the gun, they said, where you came from. But when that hit you, they said it went through both. It lined up through both your legs, cutting the bone. And they said, very fortunate. They said that you didn't, in a few minutes, lose a main artery, and they said that you could have died within a couple minutes.
Yeah.
They said somebody was watching over you, and they said, you may not think so, but they says you are. Well, so they presented me with the bullet. They said, here it is. They said, and I mean it. I still got it to this day. It's mushroomed out pretty good, and you look at it, and it's, oh man, yeah, this is what hits a deer, and you can understand how it takes them down.
Yep.
But after 6 months of laying on my back, and I mean no mobility whatsoever, I couldn't walk. There was no bathroom. There was no everything. I laid in bed, and it just started to think, was I lucky or not? I don't know, but I'm lucky to be alive. But it just finally, the doctor, he comes in after 6 months, and he says, your 6 month stay, he says, is going to be determined if you stay any longer by you. He says, we think we can take these little pins that they drilled through to pull the bones up in place. We think they're starting to get strong enough, and we need to get you up, and we need to get you walking, and we need to get your strength back. Well, that was just like telling a little boy, finally going to the candy store, because I can't wait for this. And he says, I'm going to tell you, he says, you're going to struggle. It's going to be hard. He says, this is going to be all brand new to you. You've been laying down. It's going to be tough. Well, I thought, yeah, right. I'll stand up and I'll show you. Well, again, they were right. They'd take me down to therapy, and they'd put me on a turntable, they call it, and they'd strap me in, and they'd tilt the table up, and that would hold me in place until I couldn't stand it no more, and then lay me back down. And after weeks of finally being able to be upright without getting sick or without throwing up, they said, what we're going to do now, they said, is we're going to put casts on. So I had casts from my ankles to my hip on both legs. They said that now we know that we got to start getting you mobile and getting you where you can maybe, walk in between some parallel bars or do something. But they said, we got to work at it. And they said, it's going to take time because your arm muscles too now. Or they said they're going to have to be strength.
Yep.
Well, after quite a few weeks in walking in the parallel bars and cussing and crying a lot, I I finally was able to move down the parallel bars myself and sit in a wheelchair. And it took a little over 7.5 months before they said, you know, Lon, you can go home. And that was the happiest day of my life.
Yep.
They came and got me, and we came home. And they said, you're going to have to work. There's going to have to be walking. You got to get up and walk. You got to have crutches. You got to keep walking. They said, you got to build your strength. You're the only one that can do it. Nobody can do it for you.
Nope.
So after all of that, and I was determined, and I just made up my mind, and my family did too, that you're going to walk, Dad. And so I walked through the house, and then eventually I got to go outside and walk around the outside a little bit. Wow, this is the happiest day of my life. But after all that, after the doctor said, he said, we give you so many shots up and down your legs at that time because he says you were in a lot of pain. He says, we just couldn't even give you any more pain medicine because he says you were at the top, and it's just a matter now. You're just going to have to tough it out and do the best you can. But I got up and I walked, and it's something I look back at, and what did I do? I did everything wrong. There isn't one thing that I did right. Hunting, from the pickup.
Yeah.
I mean, everything. It was my fault. My hunting partner to this day is my best friend. We see one another, and we go to football games and that. But the emotional stress that was on him, all that was just horrible, just horrible. But we both made it through it and that. And I guess the only thing that I know, when I went back for checkups, they said the only thing, Lon, they said when you turn 60, 65, you might feel it just a little bit. You know what? I'm 69, and they're right.
Yep.
The knees are a little bit, it's hard to bend. They didn't bend too good, even when we finally got to moving a little bit. They only had a certain amount of mobility, but the arthritis and everything else that's coming with it, and that now that they prepared me and said that you probably, at least in the one knee that's been really tore up, they said you probably have a new knee in there. But if you see me now, I don't limp, but when I get up from a chair, I kind of got oh boy, there is a little bit of hurt there in that. But I am missing a good share of the inside of one leg. That's what it is, and the other one, there's just like a pretty good sized hole where it went in the kneecap and that. But everything that I learned in my hunter safety course, everything that my folks taught me, I did everything wrong. There wasn't one thing that I did right, and I'm ashamed of what I guess, because I know better. You don't need to hunt on your pickup. You don't need to fire your gun from a pickup. You can walk. You can get out there and enjoy it and that. I have been asked different times here for our hunter safety course, just what we're doing here. They said, tell the story. Tell it to these new kids. And you'd be surprised. I mean, these kids, they might be, talking and that. And then all of a sudden, it's just complete quiet. And I don't. I show them. I wear shorts and I pull it up and I says, "This is what happened."
Yeah.
I says, "This is what happened," and you'd be surprised. It's just wow.
I bet it's a real eye opener for some of these kids. Because you hear the stories, but until you actually get to talk to someone and actually visually see it in person, then it hits them in a different way, I bet.
Yeah, it really is. It isn't something that they're thinking, well, yeah, right, it isn't that bad and that. But I have a lot of news clippings, and I got clippings of the first day when I was in the hospital, what it looked like and as it progressed in that. And for these kids, they see the laying in the hospital with pins drilled through with weights. Is this the way you want to end up for your hunting for the? No, don't do it. Don't do it. Get out of your pickup. Walk. Know your partner. Both know your guns and that. It's just everything was done against the whole why we did that. I don't know, but we just lost our sense of conscience, and we got the buck fever. But
yep.
it was a long ordeal, and 1 year of your basically 1 year you're without. You can't go to any of your kids and stuff. You can't. You lose a year, and it's not worth it. And whether it's hunting with a shotgun or deer, kids, please do it right. Listen to your instructors. Listen to what they're saying here. Listen to that game warden tell about the rules and regulations. There's a reason it's like that. And usually about that time when they say that, they said, here we have living proof. And,
yep.
If it helps one person, one kid in that, then it's accomplished. But it was really something to go through something like that. And I'll tell you that I have never touched a gun since.
Oh, really?
I've never touched. I don't deer hunt one bit.
Was that was the last time you deer hunted?
That's the last time.
You're saying hunting in general, even?
No, I still will get out and shoot a pheasant.
Okay.
But the deer hunting, I used to just love that opening day of deer season. But I tried it once. I went out with my kids, and there's pretty safe. And I got out, and the first shot was fired, and that I cringed so bad. I opened my gun up and laid my gun down, and then I walked back to the pickup. I said, just the memory. I can't do it.
Well, yeah, it's understandable.
I haven't been. Yeah, I can't. I haven't been back since. I haven't been back to the deer hunting since. But I'm glad my kids take it up, and now my grandkids, because they ask me about it. They say, Grandpa, what happened? And you tell them about it. Grandpa, that don't sound like you. But I said, I got excited, and I said the only thing I thought about was getting that buck. And I says everything we did wrong. I said you guys, we got a beautiful country out there, beautiful in that.
Yep.
Go out and enjoy it. Go out there and enjoy the scenery, and go out and have fun hunting. Don't do it the way I did. Don't do it like that. And I hope it gets across. And it's just a long, and it was tough on everybody. But just like it happened the other day. Well, in November, it hasn't been too long.
No.
To me, it didn't. But
have you had any lasting effects from the injury?
I have. I got on the bones, I've had them X-ray and that, and there's arthritis setting in pretty bad.
Okay.
And the knee and the kneecap that had the bullet under, they've been compromised. He called it, because he said the one kneecap, he says, it's just like it's been shoved or pushed, and he said there's no cushion there no more, and he said that all come from that bullet. He said that's all it is. And at that time, the age I was, I thought, well, 60, 65, and I won't worry about that. But if time keeps marching on, and it's here, and they warned me about. They said even after the knee surgery, they said it's going to be really hard. He said for you, he said anybody who's going to pop back in a few days, not for you, because they said some of the bone and that, and some of the way that they're going to have to fit this kneecap in, or this new knee. He says it's going to have to be modified a little bit.
Yep. Understandably.
Said, well, yep. But he just there's just things there and that, and I want to see all my grandkids hunting and that, and I got some that are going to be coming up in the hunting safety course. I want to be around.
Yeah. Well, I think you're lucky that day that you had such a loving family who advocated for you so strongly to leave that clinic and leave that other hospital and go to a bigger hospital. Now, this is back in 1982. So when you're telling me about how the doctor is telling you how he's going to do all this, I had no idea that they would even have the wherewithal or the thought or the technology to put bones back together back then. And man, he must have been one of the top guys around. I mean, the Lord must have been looking out for you that day and had such a incredible surgeon that happened to be there when you arrived.
Well, you're absolutely right, because like I said, he was a local guy from Clark here. I mean, and he's a well-known doctor. He's retired now, and he just looked at me and he says, I'm going to do whatever I can for you. And he says, I'm going to do it. And thank God he was on call, and thank God he put me back together. Later on, there were things that we could laugh about. He was quite a sportsman himself, and he said, boy, he says, I've heard about the deer you shot, and he says, this is a phenomenal deal here. He says, we're going to put the bones back together. He said, then it's going to be up to you. But he says, I'll do whatever it takes. The biggest deal was the inside of the legs, the holes that were there, and then all the infection and that they was really, really worried about. But he just said, you got to be the luckiest person in the world. He says, to even be here. But, even to this day, not this day, but not too long ago on that, and there was a knock on the door. Here it was. He was visiting town, and he said, I just wanted to see how you're doing.
Wow.
And I said, well, I'm doing pretty good. I says, I'm a little slower. He says, I tell people, and he says, my classes, stories about you. And he had clippings and stuff that this is what he did.
Yep.
In a way, I'm sure it did help in his, but he just said, the kid was going to get better. He knew it. And he just says, we did our part. He did his part. So it was just something.
Not to interrupt you, but how old were you when this injury happened, Lon?
I was born in 54. So what would that have made me? 28?
Yeah.
Nope.
Yep.
No.
74, 84. 54, 64, 74, 84. That's 30, then minus 2, 28. Yep. 28 years old.
And, I was just starting my own business in carpenter. I mean, I just had started my own being a carpenter and that. And being a carpenter, you have to be pretty, you're always moving, dealing and that. Well, that they told me, they says, you're going to have to look for a new profession. And thank God at that time, my father-in-law says, he says, we got a lot of acres to farm. He says, why don't you come work for us? So I worked for there for a while, and it took a long time to get things back to where it was.
Yep.
I just, I'm pronged. I should have quit on a long time ago, I guess, Brad, because this doctor, he looked at me and he says later on, he says, do you hunt a lot? And I says, yeah, I do. He said, he says, you must use shotguns too. And I said, yes, I do. Yeah. He said, you got about 20 BBs in your bones, in your leg? I says, yep, I know that. And he says, boy, he says, somebody's watching out for you. So that was a whole nother story there. That was one of them dumb moments, I guess you would say. But
whoa. So this isn't the first time you'd been shot?
No, I've been shot once with a shotgun before that.
What was the story on that one?
Well,
we got time. We got time, Lon. We got time. If you got time.
I'm just wondering. You're probably thinking, how dumb is this guy? But,
well, apparently the Lord is looking after you. You're still around.
Well,
he's using you to teach life lessons to other hunters out there. I strongly believe that sometimes we're put here to teach others.
I think you're right. It was one of them deals that when I was young, a little bit about a year before that, I love the duck hunt. Oh, I love the duck hunting. So one day I was just driving around, my nephew and me, and I said, look at all them ducks. I said, they live over there in that dugout. And he says, well, let's sneak up this side. I said, I got a better idea. I said, you come up one side and I'll come up the other side. We'll get them. And we went around different sides of the dugout. And I thought, I don't know, I couldn't remember, did I tell him to go up first or what? But anyway, I couldn't hear nothing. And I thought, well, I'm supposed to go up. So I went run up over the side of the dugout. And wouldn't you know it, he come up the other side of the dugout. And his first shot was across the dugout. And he hit me from the waist down. And lifted me up, and I rolled right down to the edge of the water. It was pretty hard. And he come over there, and he says, I didn't get any ducks, but he says, I think I hit you.
Oh, jeez.
Well, I says, I think you did, but I says, and you're probably going to edit this because this is really.
That's okay.
He says, what are we going to do? And I says, whatever you do. I says, we don't tell nobody. We don't tell my parents or your parents because I said, they'll take our guns away. So, here, my legs were bleeding pretty good. And we went back to the house. And that night, I told my brothers what happened and that. And they said, well, you tell Mom and Dad, they're going to take our guns away. I said, I know it, but I ain't going to say nothing. Well, the next day was football practice. So I had my brother write a fake note to get me out of football practice so I can go to the doctor. And I went in there, and she looked at me, and she said, what happened, Lon? And I pulled my pen. I said, I was shot in the legs. But she looked at it, and she says, you're still bleeding. She says, how far? And she took an x-ray, and she said, the BBs are in the bone, Lon.
Oh, wow.
And I said, yeah. I said, anything we can do? She said, I can get you some antibodies and put some gauze around it and stuff like that. But she says, that would have been another 3 foot up. You'd have lost your eyes. And I said, well, never thought about that at the moment. But I said, boy, my legs sure kind of hurt. And she says, they're going to hurt. Because she says, what's this deal over this one BB hole, like 1 or 2 places here? Well, I said, I sat in the bathroom in the house. And I said, I took a razor blade and I thought I could make an X on them and pop the BBs out, but I said I couldn't get deep enough. She looked at it and she says, I got to put stitches in there. She says, how deep did you go with that razor blade? I said, well, it bled quite a bit. No kidding. All the things. to do, all the things. And if you think you're going to hide it from your folks, forget it. That night when I got home, Mom and Dad met me at the door, and they said, well, the pharmacist left some medicine for us. I was supposed to bring home for you. They said, because we got shot. Well, guess what? The cat's out of the bag now. Don't ever try to, your mom and dad always knowing that. But it was quite a painful deal for a long time with the BBs. But even the other day when I went in there, they looked at my knees and that again, and that he looked and he says, my gosh, he said, how many babies you got in you? And I said, I don't know. They said there was quite a few in the one. They said, well, you got quite a few, and they're in the bone. So.
Wow, to this day, all those BBs are still in there. Did they get any BBs out?
The only ones I got out were the ones that were kind of on the side of my leg.
Okay.
You could see them, and I could kind of, but the other ones, no. And that was before this deer hunting accident. And my doctor from Clark, he looked and he says, BBs, rifle. He says, you ain't going to take up archery, are you? I said, I don't think so. And he says, my God. He says, you're a walking disaster. And I said, stupidity is what it was.
A walking billboard for hunter safety.
But same thing there. Why? Why would you do that? Why? Because you have that. I called it. It wasn't a dumb moment. It was stupid. Come over the dugout on each side and shoot. What's wrong with it? A guy should have learned a lesson there, but I didn't. And it was just somebody was watching over.
Yeah, the Lord was definitely watching over you. So you've since been, was it the state of South Dakota that you actually did a commercial on hunter safety, correct?
Yes, I did.
Was it the state of South Dakota?
Yep, sure was.
And how many years ago was that, Lon?
Oh boy.
You look pretty young in the commercial, so.
I was going to say that it wouldn't have been too long after that.
Okay.
I don't know. I remember him sitting there and recording it and taking pictures and all that, but I just don't remember the year in that. But
do you remember how you were asked, or did you volunteer, or how did that come about?
No, I got a knock at the door, and the guy walked in, introduced himself, and he says, I've been reading. He said, I did read your article in the Sioux Falls paper. I made the front of the Sioux Falls paper the first day after the deer season. When I got shot, they got a picture of me laying there.
Yep.
He says, we followed the story until you came home, and he said, we'd like to follow up on it if it's okay with you. And I says, well, sure is, but I says, it made me, if anything, made me more aware, and I hope it makes more kids more aware that know where you're going, know where that muzzle is, know you got a shell in the barrel. Every gun, treat it like it's loaded. It's just everything. You could write, this is a textbook of what you shouldn't do.
Yep.
That you shouldn't. And I'm not proud of it, but maybe, like you say, maybe somebody I'm put there that maybe I can help somebody else so it doesn't happen to them, because it's just from physical to mental to everything. It's just a phenomenal. It's just a horrible deal. And everybody, the kids at the hunter safety course, the main questions were they asked was, do you have dreams? Do you at night? And I said, at first I did. I really, really did. But I said, I have a strong faith, and I said, I got a good family. And I said, they helped me through it. Yeah. I said, if I could just help one kid, if I could just help one, don't do this. it's been well worth it.
Yeah, it's definitely an amazing story that you have. And yeah, I didn't know you had been shot a second time. That's that's really crazy. And and to get through all that, and especially with the physical therapy, I've had some surgeries, shoulder issues and stuff, and different surgeries. And yeah, the therapy, it's a lonely road. It's just you and your body trying to get back, and no matter how much people love you and what they want to do for you, it can't help you. It's just you, and it takes a very strong-willed person and someone that has a lot of faith and strength to make it back. And I'm so happy that you've come back from all this.
Well, it's made me a lot better. I thought I was a good hunter before, but it's made me a lot better. That's made me a lot more aware in the field when I'm with. Here up to 4 or 5 years ago, I did guide for some pheasant hunts on a lodge out here, and I don't want to use the word harp, but you can't believe how I would check, which way the guns were pointed, they're loaded. I was more aware, and like I say, it made me pass it on to these people that, we have to be safe. We do not want anything like this. Some of them got maybe a little offended, saying, well, isn't this just too much safety? And I said, there never is too much.
No.
I said, let me tell you what happened. And pretty soon they look at you and, wow, okay. So it's unusual what happened, how it happened. Like I say, it happened, but we didn't know our gun. We didn't, safety was off, and what happened.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Lon, for sharing your story. Is there anything else you want to add to it, or?
Well, I can tell you that. First of all, I'm sorry I didn't get to you at 7. I just totally blanked it out. I forgot. But sitting here talking about it and that, we're getting close to that hunting season again, and that.
Yep.
And we went through our hunter safety course here and that, and we've had the most kids, and I'm not saying just boys. We had half and half. We had girls. And it was so gratifying to see those girls out there. The smiles and the laughing.
Yep.
And, it was just like, wow, I'm glad I can be part of that. I'm just glad I can be there. Maybe I can't walk with them because I don't walk very good in any little grass or a lot of tangle up, and I fall down. So I've had to change that a little bit. The only thing I'm good for is taking a dog and guiding them and walking with them. But, that's still, it's still good. But, yeah, I hope we can touch some of the kids out there and that. And don't do this. Don't do it.
Thank you, Lon. I believe a person can will themselves to accomplish whatever they set their minds to. The famous quote from the Shawshank Redemption movie says it best: get busy living or get busy dying. The message of this line is clear. You can get out there and make something happen, or you can spend your life just going through the motions and waiting for something to happen. Lon Reidburn fought his way back from tragedy and made a great life for himself. That desire that pushed him through the lonely journey that is rehab burns in all of us. Sometimes it takes a little life-altering event to bring it out. Remember, tomorrow is promised to no one. I want everyone to be safe and enjoy all that Mother Nature has to offer. If you like what you heard today, click the subscribe button to hear more upcoming stories. If you or someone you know have a survival story you'd like to share, contact me at isurvivethewildoutdoors@gmail.com.